We are back here now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to get into some more off-season grades in the NFC West this time, looking through this division, being the last division that I'm going to grade in the NFC before we move on to the AFC North in tomorrow's episode. I thought we would talk about them here for just a few minutes here, starting off with the Arizona Cardinals as the first team on my grading system. They did get better, technically. They did get better. It's still a very young team, but obviously the biggest improvement that they made was Marvin Harrison Jr. being drafted there with the 4th overall selection in this year's draft. I love that pick. I thought it was probably the most obvious pick in the top 10, potentially in the entire draft, maybe other than Caleb Williams. But he's going to be an instant playmaker for them, instant game changer for the Cardinals, especially with having Kyler Murray there fully healthy, a full healthy offseason to reintegrate himself in a way into this offense, now having what I believe could be a prototypical elite number one receiver in Marvin Harrison Jr. I said it before the draft, months before the draft, that he could lace up for any team in February and March, and I wouldn't have any doubt about him, struggling with anything at the NFL level. He's going to create that much impact for the Arizona Cardinals, in my opinion. But staying on the topic of the draft and how the Cardinals improved through there, they had 12 draft picks this year in the draft, 7 of them being in the first 3 rounds. So again, emphasizing them being a young team. Through the offseason and free agency, they did add players like Jonah Williams, Zay Jones to add some experience to positions of need at the tackle position, and also adding some more playmakers around a Kyler Murray, around Marvin Harrison Jr. Trey McBride stepped up massively last year. Getting those guys as much help as possible is massive for them. They did technically get better in that area, so I like that they did that. But realistically, talking about the Cardinals, no one is expecting them to go from 4-13 to a perennial playoff team, 500 at best, I would guess, for this team at this point. You see on your screen there, Budda Baker. They got better on offense, definitely, but on defense, there's still a lot of holes outside of Budda Baker, so I would have liked them to address that a little bit more in free agency or through the draft, but it is what it is at this situation. Most analysts and most sources project this team to be major playoff or major contenders in free agency next year, in next offseason, so they're still buying their time. They're still trying to find their footing. This is a good step in the right direction because in 2025, they have the 4th most salary cap. They have the 4th most salary cap this year in 2024 and the 2nd most in 2025. So I think everyone right now is just anticipating that year. Not that they're going to tank or anything like that. Of course, no one tanks. But they're just going to buy their time through this year, get better, get some more experience for some of their young, important players, and then next year, hopefully they can be able to go after some big name players in the market and really make a splash move in free agency to put them in a better spot than they are right now. But they are getting better, but overall, I C+ for me because they are still young. They got better, but in a young way. They didn't get anybody that you'd expect to make a massive impact right away this upcoming year. But with that being said, we're going to move on to the next team I have on my list in this division, the Seattle Seahawks. The Seattle Seahawks, a C+ for me. I kind of debated between myself with the Seahawks whether to get them over the edge there and give them a B-, maybe into the B range, but I couldn't get myself to do it. I actually still have B- written on my sheet here, but I changed it today to a C+ just because I didn't really see them get too much better from what they had last year. I love the hiring of Mike Macdonald from the Baltimore Ravens to be their new head coach, trying to reestablish a better defensive identity with how successful he was on the defensive side of the ball for the Baltimore Ravens. I love that idea. I love that mindset that he's going to bring. You saw it in the first round by drafting Byron Murphy. Now, I thought they could have used that on an offensive lineman because of how they performed last year as a unit, and they also lost one of their best offensive linemen in Damian Lewis when he signed with the Carolina Panthers. But again, that defensive identity, trying to be strong on that side. Mike Macdonald drafts Byron Murphy, who isn't a bad pick, but I probably would have been a little bit more comfortable if they went offensive lineman. But regardless, Byron Murphy is going to be a good player for them, trying to establish right away that defensive identity. And also, They restructured Geno Smith's deal, so probably keeping him for the remainder of his contract, just letting it play out. And that's probably the safest move for them. You can't really hate on it too much, but you can't overly love it because, again, I think they've reached the ceiling with Geno. He's not awful, but they've been 500. I think they had the exact same record for the last 2 seasons. I don't think they're going to get that much better than that, quite honestly, with him as their quarterback. So in this time that, there's not too much expectations on them, they could find other ways to get better, developing a guy like Jackson Smith and Jigba. Kenneth Walker has shown those flashes, but I think he still needs to take that next step. DK Metcalf, seeing where he is, see if you can get more out of him, having a real impressive season as a number one receiver, and also some exciting players on defense like Devin Witherspoon and some of those guys like that. How that all plays out and how that defense looks now in 2024 will certainly be interesting for them. They're a little tight on cap space as it stands, so that could also be holding them back in making some big splash signings in free agency this year. But I like the addition of Jerome Baker to that defensive side of the ball after they moved on from Bobby Wagner. They re-signed Leonard Williams at $21.5 million per year. That didn't rub too many people the right way, but he was a massive piece. By re-signing him to that, they couldn't really be in play for somebody much better than what he could give you, so they kind of had to give in to that price. But he's not a bad player by any means. I think he could still provide something solid for them to get some production out of that defensive line. But overall, the Seattle Seahawks just brought back some of the main players that they had, Geno, Leonard Williams, and some of these guys. Didn't get too much better. I don't expect them to make any massive jumps from, I think they were 9-8 last year, to say something crazy like having only 5 to 6 losses. They're probably going to be around the same. So C+, doing above average, just getting everybody back, seemed fair to me with this grade. Then the next team, probably the one I loved, not just in this division, but in the entire NFL. I loved what the Rams did. I really did in this offseason. They had a great draft. Their first 4 to 3 picks were home runs for me. They got a good amount of signings also in free agency, like bringing in Tre'Davious White. Jonah Jackson's going to be massive for their offensive line from the Detroit Lions. Being able to re-sign Kevin Dotson. A little bit shaky in Pittsburgh, but once he got to Los Angeles, he was arguably one of their best offensive linemen since he's been there. Then you add to your defense in Darius Williams from the Jacksonville Jaguars. You bring over that man that you see on your screen there, bottom left, in Cameron Curl at the safety position. You also signed some other players to make some better additions to this team to just reinforce it a little bit more. But sticking to the draft some more and really talking about that, drafting Gerard Verse, there were some rumors. I talked about it actually, how they were trying to trade up for maybe a Brock Bowers, and then obviously looking at Byron Murphy. But I don't like saying they settled for Gerard Verse because I feel like that's a little disrespectful. But they got him. They added to a position of need on defensive line after the retirement of Aaron Donald. I like that move. And then in the second round, you add on to that, not just with another defensive lineman, but coming from the same school in Florida State, a partner basically playing right next to Gerard Verse all of their college careers. Gerard Verse, you bring in Braden Fisk as well. I'd love that, not just for the sentimental feeling, because I think that's really cool also, but Braden Fisk really improved or really impressed in the combine and then through his pre-draft workouts and all that. I loved him. I thought he was one of the biggest risers, and to get him second round early on, I love that pick for them. Also, Blake Corum, great season, or great career, I should say, at Michigan to add to Kyren Williams. And I was a massive fan of Kyren Williams last year as well. Now to have those two guys in your backfield just constantly, relentlessly running at teams if they wanted to, that just shows great potential with the Rams and this offensive line that got a lot better. The only thing you could really question right now is that contract situation with Matthew Stafford. He is, or has been known to want a more secure contract, some more guaranteed money at 36 years old. Nothing has really been advancing up until this point. There has been discussions, but outside of that, that is really my only gripe with them. I think a B+ is fair. It might be underselling them a little bit just because I have really been a big fan of them. I thought they got better all over their roster on offense and on defense, with Puka having another year under him, Cooper Kupp being healthy this offseason, the offensive line getting better. On the defensive side of the ball, you have some great young players in Kobe Turner, Byron Young. Then you add some more great young players in this draft and through free agency. I like what they did. They probably got better. They improved the most out of all these teams, and B plus seemed fair to me for their offseason in 2024. Before I wrap it up with the 49ers, I stuck with a B, kind of just in the middle. They were able to bring back some players, or actually not bring back some players. They actually let go of some players, but they were able to replace them with others to almost offset it a little bit. The biggest loss for them was Eric Armstead, though, as you see there on your screen. He was a massive loss just because he was the longest tenured 49er, very comfortable there, a very established piece and a very impactful piece for the 49ers. But because of salary cap reasons, they had to let him go. Sebastian Joseph Day and Javon Kinlaw all moved on in free agency, but they were able to bring in guys like a Leonard Floyd, a Yetur Gross-Matos, Malik Collins, linebacker Devondre Campbell from the Green Bay Packers. So it almost offsets, other than Eric Armstead, because he was phenomenal at what he did. So it isn't too much of a loss if they were able to bring in some of those guys to replace them. Also, moving on from Randy Gregory, Chase Young, and Cleveland Farrell, the only one that really made a giant impact was Chase Young, I believed, towards the later part of the season into the playoffs. But again, I think they have enough depth there to really not be too affected by it. Their defense is still going to be great, led there by Fred Warner. When Drake Greenlaw comes back, when and how long he will be out, will be something to monitor. But like I mentioned, bringing in Devondre Campbell shouldn't be a massive drop-off at all for this defense. And again, their biggest issue, their biggest question mark so far has been Brandon Ayuk. Will they extend him? Will they be satisfied with just drafting Ricky Pearsall, bringing back Juwan Jennings, and running it with that group led by Deebo Samuel and George Kittle? Or will they finally agree to a contract extension to keep Brandon Ayuk? Will they overpay for him? Will Brandon Ayuk settle for less money? That is still a massive storyline throughout this entire offseason. So that's why I really couldn't put the 49ers any higher, but they didn't really do too much to affect their stock. They're probably still the best team in the NFC for how consistent they are and how stacked really they are all over the field. But I thought B was enough to give them a grade to where they didn't really lose too much. They replaced everything that they lost, and they kept their big players, re-signing Christian McCaffrey and Juwan Jennings. Just Brandon Ayuk will still remain the biggest question mark for them, but those are my grades in the NFC West. Closing out the NFC before I jump into the AFC starting tomorrow on tomorrow's show. Let me know what you guys think of the grades I gave, and if you disagree or hate some of them, love some of them, please let me know in the chat box or in the comment section after this show has gone off the air. But that being said, we're going to move on with the rest of the show. We're going to go into another break, but when we return, we're going to talk about a discussion that I saw by Trey McBride, a Cardinals player, threw out the idea out there into the universe about Kyler Murray potentially being in MVP talks this season. He's had a healthy offseason for the first time in a while. Can he be in those conversations? Is he capable of doing that? And where does he currently rank among some of the top quarterbacks in the NFL? We're going to get into all of that when we return. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.